Here now, Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Senator, thanks for being here tonight. What is your take on the stage that we're at now and the actions that each side has taken?
Martha, I think it's important for everyone to remember that this trade war is not new. China has been waging a trade war against the United States for 30 years. They have not lived up to their commitments to international trade organizations or their commitments to the United States. For instance, Xi Jinping in 2015 promised Barack Obama that China would stop stealing our intellectual property and hacking into our computer systems. They broke that promise. He promised President Trump earlier this year that China would buy more of our farm products. They broke that promise as well. Yep. So this trade war hasn't been started. This trade war has been joined by the president on behalf of our farmers and ranchers and foresters and manufacturers to try to stop China's unfair trade practices that have threatened so many of our jobs and taken so many of our factories over the decades.
I mean, I think there's no doubt that, the president certainly acknowledged, and I think a lot of the players acknowledged, that this is going to be painful at times. And obviously that's a difficult thing to absorb for farmers. And they did a $16 billion sort of subsidy to help the farmers. What's the impact of this to tough it out and to get to the other side, if that's where we're going here? What's the potential impact, do you think, on the 2020 election?
Well, there's no doubt that it's tough times in farm country, partly because of the trade dispute we have with China, partly other factors as well, like a very wet spring and some flooding as well. That's one reason why the president and the Secretary of Agriculture announced earlier this year the market facilitation program to try to help protect our farmers from some of those harms of China's trade practices. But ultimately, China needs American food. They cannot feed their own people. They really can't even source all of the food they need from other countries. So if we hang tough, if we stand behind in a firm, united fashion, the United States trying to fight this trade war with China, I'm confident that not only our farmers, but all Americans will ultimately benefit.
Yeah. And what about China and the move that they made in devaluing their currency, which is, currency manipulation is something that's been going on for a long time there as well. Does that sort of show a further weakness on their side and a short-term play that they're carrying out?
Martha, I think it does reveal that the Chinese leadership is worried, perhaps on the border of panicked, about this trade war that we have finally joined against them. They devalued the currency briefly yesterday, but then they stabilized it in part because of the impact it would have on their own Chinese consumer market. China's been manipulating its currency for a very long time, in addition to a whole other host of policies they've used to gain unfair advantages on American workers.
Yeah, and this president's the first one to actually call them out as a currency manipulator, although we've been hearing about it and talking about it for a very long time, as you say, Senator. The other tensions that China is dealing with right now is what's going on in Hong Kong, which appears to be an escalating situation. Now you've got a mass of 12,000 Chinese troops on the border as they, sort of approach this anniversary date. What do you see happening there?
Martha, the tensions just outside of Hong Kong and with the protests inside of Hong Kong are very high. Beijing should make no mistake, though. If they were to impose martial law on Hong Kong or otherwise crack down in violation of Hong Kong's basic law or the 1984 joint declaration that took Hong Kong back to Chinese governance, it would require a fundamental reappraisement of the United States' relation with China. I would call for halting all trade negotiation, for imposing sanctions on senior Chinese Communist Party officials, revoking their visas and the visas of their family members, revising the Hong Kong Policy Act, which gives Hong Kong its special privileged status as an isle of freedom inside a sea of Chinese tyranny. If they were to crack down on Hong Kong or impose martial law or send all of those police officers and troops into Hong Kong, then it would be a moment like Tiananmen Square was 30 years ago. Only this time I would hope that we don't make the mistakes of largely letting Beijing off the hook as we did after the Tiananmen Square massacre.
I got to go, but quickly, what do you put the chances of that happening at?
The tensions are very high. I would simply caution Beijing not to doubt American resolve and not to cross that border and not to impose martial law or otherwise violate their obligations under the 1984 joint declaration relative to Hong Kong.
Senator, thank you. Great to see you tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Martha.